Good evening, members. Members. Members, both Councillor Ponder and Lambert have given apologies for tonight's meeting. We're therefore in the unusual situation of not having a chair or acting chair. Therefore, you will need to elect an acting chair for the duration of this meeting. Also, because we're all regulars here, I'll dispense with the fire evacuation procedure. We all know it. Are there any nominations?
Councillor Quilty, I think
chair?
it was already, somebody spoke to him already. But anyway.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Kaza, please.
Okay, so we have Councillor Quilty and Kaza nominated. Are there any others? Okay, so we shall vote. Votes for Councillor Quilty, please. Votes for Councillor Quilty, please. And vote thank you. And votes for Councillor Kaza. Okay, in that case, Councillor Kaza, can you please join us here and bring your name card as well?
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for electing me as acting chair for this evening's meeting. I'm Aditya Kaza, and I'll be chairing this meeting for tonight. I'd like to welcome members of the public, colleagues, and officers to this meeting. And to manage the business as efficiently as possible, I'll invite people to speak one at a time to ensure that their contributions are properly heard. Please do not speak unless invited to do so, and thank you in advance for your assistance. We all know the fire evacuation drill, so I won't go over it. We know the assembly point is at the car park by the roundabout. So item 1 is membership. We already have apologies from Councillor Ponder, and I know Councillor Allen is substituting for him. And we have an apology from Councillor Lambert. And that's the only thing they have. Yes. And then we also have Cripps Green. Is she?
Gibbs Green.
Yeah. Yes. She's coming?
He's a man. He's not coming.
Right. So Gibbs Green, excuse me, from Hertfordshire County Council Youth County Council Services for Young People has notified that he's unable to attend the meeting. So if you want to raise any points relating to that item, do let me know. I'll see what Democratic Services can do. Declarations of interest is item 3. Do any members have any declarations? I take it as a no. Then we'll continue. Minutes from the last meeting, that was 14th January this year. Are we in agreement that that's the accurate record of that meeting? Okay, thank you. Then I will sign that at the end of this meeting. Item 5 is the Hertfordshire County Council Services for Young People presentation, but obviously as the member isn't here, can we move on? Or sorry, Ian Kosher.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I mean, I've gone through the report and tried to pick out a few bits and pieces, and I can potentially pull out some of the areas which are kind of more specific for Hertsmere, if members would find that useful, and we can take any questions from members, and if we know the answers, we will obviously give them, but if we don't, we will refer them back and get a response for you from the Services for Young People. So there are a range of services that Services for Young People provide. across the county and then specifically targeted within Hertsmere. What you have in front of you is a series of reports covering each of the terms. I won't go through each because they do, understandably, a number of the activities are replicated term to term. But the services has its matrix standard accreditation, which gives quality assurance around it. There's the reports that you've got has a range of positive feedback from young people, and what I would pick out in particularly is probably some of the more targeted services that are focused on children in need and requiring different support. So there's a particular focus on children who are NEET. There are a lot of acronyms in this report, and I will do my best to unpick them where I can. So NEET is not in education, employment or training. So the aim there is obviously to bring those young people into more positive activity, and there are a range of programs which help assist with that, including the recruitment employment pathways and the Explore More program. There is understandably a focus on care leavers, and it's a well-documented fact that children in care, unfortunately, often have poorer outcomes than their counterparts in their peer group, and as the county council is the corporate parent for those children, so it's a particular responsibility towards them to help them succeed and thrive. And then there is a kind of series of interventions which are really designed to as preventative steps to prevent children coming into care in the first place and maintain them in strong family settings. So there is understandably focus on children missing from education, children with special educational needs and in receipt of educational health and childcare plans. And I think I'd pick out some of the specific things that have been taking place in Hertsmere. Some of this activity is coordinated with Three Rivers and Watford, which is the way that is organised by the county council. So the various projects to bring young people into work or deliver them work experience, and then specific youth work projects run. There is quite a focus on Boreham Wood. That is unsurprising because Boreham Wood contains Cowley Hill, which is one of the highest level of deprivation wards in the county, and so rightly there's greater need there, so there's greater focus of these more targeted services in the area. Quite a bit of the work is done through Boreham Wood Youth FC, and so quite a bit of partnership work with sports provision in the borough is a great way of engaging young people. And I would pick out some of the holiday programs. So there's the Easter Hat, where there were 77 people attended across the three centres in Watford, South Oxley and Boreham Wood Football Club. And work at Aycliffe Road Youth Work Project. Again, that's in partnership with Boreham Wood Youth FC on a Monday evening. They're engaging 13 young people a week. Duke of Edinburgh Award Programme run out of the Boreham Wood Young People's Centre. And I think the Boreham Wood Detached Youth Project is one which is worth a highlight, because I think detached youth work brings particular value engaging young people who are not necessarily actually engaged with organised structures so much. So it's actually going out in a fairly charismatic way and engaging those young people and bringing them into more constructive activity. There's similarly been Potters Bar a seen detached youth project as well, where 15 young people have been engaged on a regular basis at the skate park in Potters Bar. There are a variety of similar projects, and I think those themes you can see that have run through the report. I won't run through it all because you've had the report, but I think those were just a few of the highlights which were worth pulling out. But there's an enormous scope of work that's been presented here, which is, I would say, in my previous experience working in community safety, of enormous value to young people, and I'm a personal fan of youth workers delivering very strong outcomes. I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thank you, Ian, for that update. Do members have any questions, any doubts? Councillor Georgiou?
Thank you, Councillor Carser. It's disappointing that somebody from Hertfordshire County Council isn't presenting this report, I think, and it would have been better if we could have asked questions of somebody from Hertfordshire County Council about this very important issue for our borough. There are some very big problems in Hertsmere in regards to things like SEND support, with children being sent very far distances to go to SEND schools. And we also have some very big problems around things like youth centres. I mean, it's quite conspicuous that the report mentions that people are being, met in the skate park rather than having a facility somewhere in Potters Bar that would be used for that purpose. There was once a youth centre in my ward of Oakmere, which is the most deprived ward in Potters Bar. However, that centre has fallen into disrepair, to put it lightly, and I would have liked to have spoken to somebody from HBC to hear about what it is that they're doing for our young people, because frankly it doesn't seem like they're doing very much in Potters Bar.
Yes, Ian.
Yeah, I just feel I'm obliged to offer a bit more explanation about the absence of Kipps, who was absolutely intending to be here tonight, but personal circumstances cropped up this morning, which just meant they weren't able to attend. So I don't think there's any attempt to duck the meeting or any of the questions that members would rightly want to raise, and I just felt it's important to say that.
Any other questions on this item? Councillor Quilty?
Thank you. And I think it's fair to say, to begin with, it is disappointing we don't have an officer present to actually expand on this very detailed report, which gives a broad overview of where we are. I think if we did have an officer present, we would be able to actually learn a lot more, and it would be very beneficial. But we are where we are, and I suppose it's up to our officers to go back to the Hertfordshire officers, the old connection team, as we used to call it, to actually learn more. My thoughts are really, since COVID, this area has become very difficult because it's expanded in a number of ways. And one that I highlight particularly is the not in education, employment or training numbers. That's called NEET. If they always use these sort of odd anagrams or whatever you call them. Anyway, there we are, NEET. Young people aged 16 to 18. They're a very important cohort, and we can see that the figures have jumped from 23 to 1.85% to in a year to 24 to 3.32%. Now, we haven't got the latest figures, so hopefully it's bubbling around the same number. But I think we need to have a full explanation of why this has gone up and what are the officers doing to get it rectified. I don't know. I'm sure you can't answer this, so no, I understand that.
No,
totally.
I absolutely can't give you a definitive answer. What I would say is that when the cohort is small, then one or two additional children will give you a significant percentage jump. So I think the numbers that you've got here only reflect a couple more children would make that difference.
Listen, I hear where you're coming from, but I don't exactly agree with that. I mean, each child, it's so important that we get this right for the children in Hertsmere and in Hertfordshire, and it's a growing thing. It says here NEET available. I'm not too sure what that means, and NEET not available. So what does that, maybe we could start there and say, what does that exactly mean? We're talking about a total number of 80 children. 80 children in Hertfordshire, Hertsmere, is quite a lot. It's quite a number.
Yeah, as I understand it, the available, not available is whether they are actually available for education and employment training. And there was a cohort who weren't available, full stop, whereas the NEET available are actively being promoted.
I'm not sure. Maybe we should get a full explanation from the officers when we can. Maybe, Mr. Chairman, we should invite the officers back to give a proper presentation when they're available, so we can actually understand this in greater detail. Because I think it is very important and it needs to be drilled into.
Yeah, I was going to echo that at the end of this section of the thing, saying that I think it'll be good to have, especially if the officer is willing to come, and obviously personal circumstances prevented him. But yeah, if they're willing to come, then we'd like to have a more detailed in-person chat with them. I have Councillor Rani next on the questions.
Yes, the SEND improvement plan quarterly progress update is like up from April 2024 report a 78% reduction in the number of children and young people waiting for a speech and language therapy assessment for their education, health and care plans. What strategies were implemented to achieve this reduction, and how are these improvements being sustained?
And apologies, members, because I think these questions highlight exactly the points. We're not in a position to be able to answer that. The item was on the agenda for tonight. There was every intention of an officer from the county council coming to explain and talk to them. We wanted to, well, we couldn't withdraw the item from the agenda, so you've got an opportunity to discuss it tonight, but clearly not the full opportunity that members wish. And I'm absolutely sure that the officers from the County Council would want to come back to a future meeting to give you fuller answers to the questions, but I'm afraid I can't do that.
Once again, Councillor Morris, before you. So on that thing, could you just make it clear, crystal clear, that we're really interested to hear firsthand from the officer? Councillor Morris.
Yeah, I'm really going to support what everyone's saying, because it's a bit of a pointless discussion this tonight, because we aren't able to, I was going to use the word interrogate, but discuss with the officer. It would seem to me it's a bit of a pointless continuing the discussion on this item as we haven't got an officer here. And my proposal would be that he's invited back to the next meeting, subject to his availability, so that we can address this in a proper and full way.
On that point, Councillor Morris, I'm sure we can work with Democratic Services to arrange a follow-up at however the timelines work out. So if there's no other questions on this item, I think we can move on to item 6, which is the quarterly financial monitoring update, quarter 3, presented by Matthew and Mary.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll be presenting the report this evening. So in terms of the overall financial monitoring then, this is presenting the position as at quarter 3, so the 31st of December. And it's reporting the position as at that time and the forecasts as at that time, and obviously things change as we go through the year. So as normal, there's 4 elements to the report reflected in the 4 appendices A to D, and that is revenue monitoring, capital monitoring, treasury management and debt. So if with the Chair's permission, I'll go through each of the appendices, give a bit of commentary and then pause for questions after.
Yeah, so the same system that we normally do at operations review. Yeah, we can go ahead with that.
Okay. So if I move on to Appendix A then, so there's a summarised position on page 3 of Appendix A or page 41 of the pack, which shows the overall position as at Q3 with a surplus of 1.585 million, and by year end we're expecting that to rise to 1.668 million. And I think it's obvious that the most significant element of that is coming from investment income, and I'll come to that when we get to Appendix C on treasury management. But I think for now, if I can focus on service expenditure, actually the overall service expenditure is showing a surplus as at Q3 of 280k, and we're expecting a year-end surplus across services of 167k. There's obviously variances up and down across the various services, and I think I just wanted to touch on the more significant ones. So in terms of positive variances, planning's currently showing a favourable variance of 143,000, and that's mainly due to income being forecast to be very good by the end of the year, a net position of 190k to the good. In particular, our planning application income is forecast to be up significantly by year end, to the tune of about 230k. Pre-application and PPAs as a net position is also shown favourable, and this is then offset a little bit by SIL income being below target, and the reason for that is we're only allowed to claim 5% of our SIL income as an admin fee, so that's the maximum we're allowed to actually claim, so it's nothing we can do about sort of collecting any more in that respect. The overall increase in income for planning is, however, offset a little bit by employee costs being higher due to sort of covering vacancies with some agency staff, but also additional resource there. And actually that also is then reflected in the additional income that's coming in because of the additional workload that's being experienced in that team. Environmental health is also shown a favourable variance of around 70k by year end. That's predominantly due to vehicle licensing income being up. So we've seen an increase in volume of taxi drivers coming to Hertsmere for their vehicle licence, whereas previously they may have gone to other authorities. So we've seen a bit of a surge in that. So it suggests that our pricing is probably good. And I think we've seen sort of taxi drivers coming out of London and to Hertsmere, whereas actually because of changes in legislation and the way the scheme works in London, but ultimately a taxi driver can go to any authority to get their vehicle licence. It doesn't have to be their local authority. Street scene services also shown a favourable variance, currently at 229k with a year-end forecast of 199k. Various reasons for that. We've had sort of ongoing vacancies within the parking service. Although that said, income in parking is actually up. So 2 positive variances there. Also, that is offset slightly by the fact that our pay-by-phone charges have increased. So where people are paying more and more by phone rather than using coins or whatever, then we're getting bank charges as a result of that. So, and then also there's a slight increase in costs for recycling, and that's a very volatile area, so we see the charges that are made for our recyclables sort of going up and down throughout the year, and actually they're slightly higher than we'd forecast in the budget originally. So they're the three areas that I would say have got the positive variances at the moment. On the flip side of that, we've got asset management that's showing the current adverse variance for year end of 111,000. You'll see that employees are overspent. However, that is more than offset by the additional income that is forecast to come in. So actually by the end of the year, we're forecasting an additional 490k's worth of income from asset management. And that's been as a result of rent reviews, lease renewals, making sure that all of the garage lettings are up to date, and we're letting as many garages as we can. And that's partly why the employee costs are up, because additional resource has been brought in to ensure that we're able to generate the maximum amount of income. Costs, on the other hand, are also up. We've seen premises costs go up due to increases in business rates. Also, utility costs rising again. But most predominantly, the work that asset management have been doing throughout this year around feasibility works using consultancy in terms of how we can best utilise our assets going forward has seen some significant costs. Some of that may be recouped in the future through capital programme if any of those projects do come forward as capital projects, so we may be able to recover some of that. Legal costs are also, or legal and democratic is also forecast to be over budget by year end to the tune of 135k. We've had some additional agency staff within the legal team earlier in the year. All of those posts have since been permanently recruited to, but obviously those costs are still there. The most significant increase in the costs there is due to elections and the fact that our elections manager had moved on, and we brought in additional external resource to cover both elections. Now only some of that resource could be recovered through the election process, so there's significant additional costs as a result of that. I think I've touched on all the main points I wanted to for revenue, so I'll pause there if there's any questions.
Members, any questions? Councillor Georgiou, and then anyone else for now? Okay. Councillor Quilty after that.
Thank you, Councillor Kaza. Hi Matthew. There were some items on here where we are potentially underspending, in my opinion, and I'd like to hear a bit more about your opinion about what we can do to make sure that we're utilising the resources in our budget to deliver the kinds of services that we need to. So some of the areas around street scene services and environmental health, I think if we spoke to any of our constituents and asked them how do we think the environment's doing, I think that they would say probably pretty poorly on many in many ways, in terms of litter, in terms of damage to our rivers and other kinds of areas. What do you think could be done to improve and make sure that we're spending those resources in these areas? Because although it's good that there's obviously an underspend, that's not necessarily good if those services aren't being delivered as well as they could be.
Well, I think I'll start an answer to that, but then I might refer to my colleague. I mean, essentially, we set a budget at the beginning of the year based on the services that we intend to deliver, and the whole purpose of the monitoring is to monitor how we're performing against what we have said that we would do, whether that be a positive difference or a negative difference. Ultimately, if we do have underspends, there's reasons behind that, and I think within street scene, what I've mentioned there is actually our parking income has increased, but we've also had significant vacancies in terms of our parking staff, hence why we've had a positive variance there. So you need to weigh that out with what the service is performing, and I think that's demonstrated by the income level that's there. We haven't seen a drop-off in income as a result of not having the right staff in place. In terms of what we could do, well, I think there's a number of initiatives that do come forward throughout the year, which can be funded from service underspends, which can be funded from contingency, and we've had a number of things throughout this year, and you'll see that there is a contingency budget, which has been pretty much utilised this year from other things that come forward. But ultimately, when we go through the budget process every year, we do review our spend, we do review whether that spend is still appropriate, and we may reduce budgets or we may increase budgets, which we'll then present to the council. But ultimately, we're led by the council in terms of what your priorities are, and that's the basis on which we set our budgets.
Yeah, and just to come back on the kind of street scene specifics, recruitment and retention of staff is a key risk for us, and has been a pressure over recent years, but we've made significant strides against that. So there are a couple of areas where we've been carrying vacancies and struggled to recruit for some time. And waste and street cleansing loaders would be one of those. We put a detailed recruitment retention plan in place, and we are doing far better against that now. And we are able to recruit the additional staff that we need for our new food waste rounds. There was an issue. It wasn't an issue which was specific to Hertsmere. It was across the industry. But we put some particular plans in locally which have had a positive impact, and I think actually we're better placed in that area than a number of our neighbouring authorities. So I'm very satisfied with the position there. I just wanted to mention two other areas. So parking, we've had vacancies, and that has been particularly around our civil enforcement officers. But again, we are we've got one vacancy at the moment, which is a good, strong position. When we recruit staff in our civil enforcement officers, we tend to keep them, which is unlike the profile of other authorities. I think the fact that on both of these services we have the services in-house, it gives us a degree, and we have our own pay and conditions, it gives us a degree of flexibility and responsiveness, which is very helpful in those situations. The other aspect of cleansing is, of course, parks, and that's delivered through our grounds maintenance contract with John O'Connor. We have had a significant focus on performance of the contractor around cleansing of parks and open spaces, and the performance, there's always room for improvement, but the performance has improved significantly. The contractors put more resource into that area. And also, to be fair to the contractor, we've changed our specification. So there were some parks and areas which were serviced on a 3-weekly basis, and on review that wasn't sufficient, and we've upped it. So there is always, I would say, more to be done, but we've seen a continuous improvement in all of those areas, I would argue.
Councillor Quilty.
Thank you. And it's fair to say that planning and that area is one of the most important things that this council is doing at any time, and particularly at this special time when we are trying to get a local plan in place. In fact, I can remember someone saying that we'd have one within 6 months of the election, but that hasn't happened. We're 2 years down the road and it still hasn't happened. But what worries me here is that, according to these papers anyway, we've got 23% of our planning officers are vacant. It's vacant, you know. Now, I dare say that other people are taking the stress and strain up, whether they're temporary people, agency staff or whatever. It's costing us more than likely, but they're taking the stress up. But because I've already said that this is such an important area, I'm just wondering, when are the officers going to get to grips with the fact that we need to have 100% of our employees working in the planning team who are employed by us? Because some of these things are senior planning officers, you know, we've got principal planning officers, we've got, and I could list them out here, there's a big long list of them. And it's a worry. It's a real worry. And I think we need to get grip of this now.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Corti. There was a report that went up to Personnel Committee back in January, I believe it was, and then that fed through into the budget, and actually we've reviewed the grades and the reward package for planners as well as environmental health officers to try and entice permanent members into those roles to do exactly what you've just suggested we should be doing. So it has been extremely challenging attracting people to those professional roles. It's not just in Hertsmere, it's all across, because there just simply aren't the number of planners that want to come and work for local authorities anymore, not when they can seek much better reward by going to work for companies up in London, etc. But we are doing what we can to make sure that we're benchmarking our salaries against other local authorities and enhancing those salaries where we can to make them more attractive.
Councillor Quilty.
Yeah, no, I hear what you say, but, you know, reality is this is a huge percentage. I mean, is this figure the current figure that's vacant at the moment, 23%? Do you know if that's a current figure or has it gone up, down? Because it's a real worry. I hear what you're saying about you're trying to do things, but it's not moving.
Yes, you've got the figures in front of you for October, November, December. So that's where they are. It does fluctuate, but ultimately some of that is additional resource, some of it is, I mean, all of these vacancies are being covered by agency staff, and that's what this table is showing you. So we have got staff in there to cover those roles, but as you say, they are more expensive if they're agency staff rather than permanent.
So how is this affecting the fact that we haven't had a local plan that was supposed to be done in 6 months and we're now 2 years down the line? Is this affecting the local plan as well? Because it must be somewhere down the line.
Obviously, I can't comment for my planning colleagues, but I would say that, yes, it's obviously had an impact on that if we haven't got the resource. However, you'll see there is obviously the local plan report that is coming forward to council, and additional resources being recommended to deliver the local plan.
Okay, thank you very much for your help. Cheers.
I've got Councillor Georgiou and then Councillor Nicholas and then Councillor Allen.
Thank you again. Just to come back on what we were speaking about earlier with some of the underspends, I'd like to see us perhaps make a recommendation to say if we could use some of those underspends from this year in the next year to try and help make sure that we firm up some of these resources. So whether it is using some of that money to make sure our planning team is properly resourced, or to also just make sure we do some extra street cleans and things like that to pick up for the fact that we've had a lot of fly tipping as a result of the waste services in our area that have often closed or full at capacity, and the recycling centres where it's really difficult to get access, and the inevitable fly tipping that we then see. So I understand that we've just had a budget meeting, but I just wanted to know a bit more about our ability to use some of those underspends in this year to try and perhaps top up some of those areas where we're struggling.
I think Ian wants to come in on that specific point, but if I can just sort of make a general point first. We're looking at a year-end underspend, and that's what we're forecasting at the moment. That is a one-off underspend because we've now set our budget for next year, which reflects the position that we believe we need to deliver the services that we've agreed we'll deliver for next year. So ultimately, this is a one-off. So I wouldn't recommend that you're then looking to enhance service delivery going forward. If we are going to spend that, and I will be doing an out-term report to the Cabinet probably in July, which will make recommendations around what we do with that surplus. But we couldn't add it into the budget next year without then creating further gap in our budget funding for future years beyond. So ultimately it's a one-off surplus which we should be utilising for one-off purposes. Yeah,
and I just wanted to come back on the fly tipping issue. it's something which is clearly blights residents' lives. It's a serious issue, but I just want to kind of rebut slightly the notion that it's in any way resulted in any from any cut in waste services, because we haven't cut any waste services. In fact, we're providing more waste collections, and we'll be doing additional collections. The particular issue that we have from fly tipping, we have a degree of urban fly tipping, which pretty every urban area has at the same level. Our particular problem is the fly tipping that we get in the small rural lanes and anywhere which is generally accessible off the A1, M1, M25, A41, and these are criminal fly tippers who are bringing waste that they would have to pay to dispose of in a commercial setting, and they are using us as a convenient dumping ground. We are doing a lot to try and tackle that. And obviously we invested in our new community enforcement team, and that team has made massive inroads into the issue. They've delivered over £9,000 worth of fixed penalty notices since they were established in July, brought 2 serious cases through the court process. And apologies, I know you're aware of it, but I'm also aware that we're streaming, and I wanted to make it very clear for residents that this is an incredibly important issue for us that we are really working hard to tackle, working also with private landowners to help them target harden their land and reduce the opportunities and make Hertsmere as hard as possible for these criminals to carry out this activity.
Councillor Nicholas.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to come back as the Chair of Personnel Committee on the matter of the planning officer recruitment. This is an issue that we've been trying to tackle in committee for a long time. We talk about it at virtually every committee meeting, and we've looked at a number of different approaches. We tried a little while ago to look at introducing a hybrid working trial in planning, because that was one of the key reasons that we were finding people were rejecting the role, even up to the point that they had been offered the role, hybrid working, and our hybrid working policy was not working for them. There are now some changes to that on the table, which we hope when they come forward fairly soon after staff consultation, that will make a difference to recruitment process. And there have also recently been put in place some plans to incorporate the retention scheme that's used in waste services at the moment to retain staff in planning as well. So I think, and as Matthew already said, the restructure of the pay policy in there as well. So I think moving forward, there are some hopeful green shoots that may make a difference, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be fixed overnight. Because we know that it's a particularly difficult area to recruit in at the moment. We are right on the border with London, which means that people can get better paid roles just a few miles down the road. And they're very much in demand at the moment. And when the option perhaps to go and work somewhere where you can have all the benefits of working in a private company and do some consultancy work to help out all the local authorities that have got problems with their local plans at the moment, that is quite often for some planning officers a preferable choice. So it won't fix it immediately, but hopefully those steps that have now been taken will improve matters greatly in terms of recruitment.
Councillor Allen.
Matthew, you referred briefly to the cost of agency staff pushing up the numbers in the wrong direction slightly. Can you expand a bit on that? Apologies if this is in the papers, because I'm a guest here, I've not had access to them. But is that an off-the-shelf price for agency staff? And is there any room to make efficiencies which haven't yet been explored? For example, negotiation or kind of bulk buy?
I think I've got Kirsten here, so she might be able to add to my response as well. We have an agency contract, We went out to the market to procure that, and essentially what that is doing is agreeing what the uplift is that goes to the agency over and above the rate that is agreed for the employee. Ultimately, because of the market out there at the moment, the employee can basically sell their services at a price, and whether we're willing to pay that, whether it be an hourly rate or a day rate, that is what we're competing with. Not all agency costs are more expensive than we would pay for a permanent member of staff. There are areas, for example, waste collection, where we've been using agency staff for a long time, and actually it's more efficient to do that. One, because of the nature of the service and the fact that you're trying to staff it on a daily basis and cover sickness, absence, etc. But actually, for a long time, agency workers were cheaper than permanent. But for professions, generally, it is the other way, and you will find that professionals are more expensive if you're bringing them in on an agency contract than on a permanent contract. It's been a challenge for us. We've tried to keep our agency costs down. They have been reducing year on year, but we will always have areas that are difficult to recruit to where we don't really have a choice. If we need the resource, we've got to go to that. But I say we have been to procurement, and we've made that appointment based on the agencies for each specific area. So can I, Chair, with your permission, if I can hand over to Kirsten, maybe? It looks like she's itching to comment.
Yeah, Kirsten, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, agency staff is a particularly difficult market. We do have a framework that covers all the various specialisms with agreed on-cost rates from the agencies. However, as Matthew says, especially in the professional area, finding someone who is willing to work for that has its difficulties. And as you may remember, I look after 2 other councils, and the same thing applies at those as well. It's such a demand-led on the agency staff that we can do our best, but we can't always keep the costs as low as we'd like.
So in summary, from your point of view, it's as tight as it can be at the moment.
Yes, Chair. I think we're doing everything we can to try and attract permanent members of staff, and that's where we want to go. But where we have vacancies and we need that resource, then we have no other choice really but to go to the agency, hence why we have a contract in place with our preferred agencies.
If members don't have any other questions, I had a question of my own, Matthew. As you can appreciate, I know agency costs and that aspect of it comes almost regularly every time you come to present to us. My question, though, is for the value of money that we're getting, for what we're paying, are we getting value for money with all the agency staff? And what are we doing over time to try and reduce the amount of staff that we can? Obviously, I know, demand, it fluxes as the year goes on, per department and so on. But overall, are we getting, the best value that we can?
I think you're absolutely right. It's around that demand and whether we need agency workers. And there has been a real push corporately to try and move from using agency workers that may have been with the authority for a long time to try and either get them into a permanent role or to replace them with permanent staff. And actually, that's been happening at chief officer level over the last few years with regular reports being presented to chief officer's board and the chief officers then challenging heads of service as to why they're continuing using agency staff in specific roles, and as a result of that we have seen the number of agency staff coming down across the board. But unfortunately, coming back to planning, it is one of those areas that it is a real struggle at the moment to recruit professional staff.
And then on a similar theme, generally just looking at the market overall, what we're paying for the agency staff, is it in line with the general trend for what other councils, other companies, they're paying for agency staff?
Generally, we're paying agency staff what the market is demanding. So I would say yes in that respect. We will go to an agency and they will give us a number of CVs, and generally each CV will come with a rate, and you're paying for the quality of that person you're looking to take on.
Ian, did you have anything to add?
I was just going to say, I mean, we try and benchmark not only for permanent staff but also for agency staff as well. So we are looking across to see where do we stand with our neighbours who are kind of, frankly, fishing in the same pool and our competitors for some of these staff. We monitor that as carefully as we can. It's always a little bit tricky to get hold of what is ultimately, at the end of the day, commercially sensitive information, but we have our roots, and we do actively benchmark on those sectors too.
Any other questions, Councillor Georgiou?
Thank you. On the asset management income analysis, it seems as though we have potentially were in quite a good position by the year end. What can you tell us about the full kind of year end to today? Are we still on track to deliver the profiled budget? And I can see that we're expecting around £9 million of income from various sources, and we seem to have been on track as of this report to deliver that. Actually, about 400,000 over that. So. What can you tell us about that, and also about the, I understand there was a small deficit in terms of things like employee costs, but where our income is exceeding that, in your opinion, is that acceptable? Because it means that we're potentially bringing in more income, and of course that means we'll have some more employee costs and things like that in that sector.
I think I'll come back to where I started. The report, ultimately this is a position as at that 31st of December and what we were forecasting at that date. As to where we are now, as you all know from being on financial monitors, we do look at revenue on a monthly basis. The overall forecast is still looking quite good for the year. I can't remember the figures off the top of my head without looking up the papers, but I think we're still in the sort of ballpark position that's being presented here.
Right, okay. If there's no other questions on this item, then I think we can move on to the next part of the report, which is capital monitoring, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And so I think I'll be briefer on the other parts of the report. But, so in relation to capital, which is set out in Appendix B, the report includes the revised budget position for the programme for 24-25 through to 26-7. And as members will be aware, the capital programme is a rolling programme, and we can make additions to that programme at any point during the year, subject to the appropriate cabinet or council approvals. And as you'll see in paragraphs sort of 2.3, 2.4, there have been a number of additions during 24-5, which actually total around £7.4 million worth of new schemes. So they're schemes that have been added into the programme and agreed by the relevant body, whether that be Cabinet or Council. The report then goes on to set out performance against that revised budget for 24-5. And what we're showing is the projected year-end variance is around 20 million against a revised budget of 42.2 million. And that includes slippage of around 10.2, and there's a number of schemes listed in paragraph 3.4, which are schemes that have slipped. And you'll see there's 3 large housing schemes there which make up the majority of that, which are going through sort of the planning process currently. So they're in the sort of early stages of those, and those schemes will come forward over the next year. There's also around 10.3 million of underspend reported at this stage, and I'll just remind members what I said earlier, that this is the forecast as at December, and there was a change to some of those underspends when we reported the capital programme to Council as part of the budget for next year, we agreed that there was around 7.5 million from memory of that was coming out of the programme in terms of schemes that are no longer going to progress around the studios. But we did set aside around £1 million to invest in stages 7, 8 and 9 to undertake health and safety works to bring those stages back into use a lot quicker. So that position has changed ever so slightly. And we're reporting also an overspend position, mostly in respect of one scheme at St John's, and there will be a report coming forward on that once we've agreed the final account with the contractor. But ultimately that additional cost is being funded from Local Authority Housing Fund grant that we've received, so it won't impact directly on our capital receipts, but nevertheless it's an overspend and it does need to be reported and agreed. So I think that's probably it on capital. There is a detailed table at the end of the report that shows on a scheme-by-scheme basis where we're forecasting the position for year end, and happy to take any questions on it, anything specific.
Members, any questions? Councillor Quilty?
Yeah, I've got two about the, it's to do with the funding and capital programme, right there, and the first one really is disabled facilities grant. It's dropping off year by year, and I'm wondering why is that? Is that a government sort of who are actually giving us less money to pay for the disabled facilities? So that's the first one. And the second one, it's a bit more interesting, is that it says in the bottom of this table, investment income loss at 4.75%. It's over £1 million. I'm just curious as to know, what does that mean?
Okay, so in relation to DFGs, the figure of 749, that's actually increased, and the budget that went through in February, I think that figure rises to about 855 from memory per annum. That is the grant that we get annually from the government for investing in DFGs. The reason the revised budget for 24-25 is higher than that is because that includes any underspend that we've had or unspent grant that we've had in prior years that we've then brought forward into this year's programme to make sure we're fully utilising that grant. So we can only use DFG funding for providing DFG grants to individual properties. So anything that is remaining at the end of the year, we don't give it back to government, and we make sure that we carry it forward to the next year. So that's why we've got that programme. So anything that we don't spend in 24-25, we will slip into the next financial year, and that will increase the revised budget for next year, essentially.
Very quickly, how are we actually publicising the fact that we've got available grants available to be spent?
I mean, the scheme is publicised on our website, on the county's website. Ultimately, there's an assessment process for a DFG. That's actually undertaken by the county, and then cases are referred to us.
Any other questions, members?
Hold on. Investment
there was
income loss.
There was
I don't understand that.
That is there for information. Ultimately, as we spend our capital, we've got a capital programme there of 42 million. As we're spending the money that we've got, the amount that we've got left to invest is reducing. So if we're going to spend £20 million, then we're not going to earn a return on that £20 million. So it's just there for information, really, just to make you aware that actually there, as a result of taking decisions on spending on the capital programme, there is a direct impact on the revenue budget because we will see a reduced investment return.
Councillor Georgiou.
Thank you again. One of the largest areas of slippage is around 197 Darks Lane development in Potters Bar. What can you tell us about what we're doing this year to try and prevent that slipping again, and so that we're making sure that we have a capital budget that's reflecting the kind of work that we're able to achieve in the year? And really, if there's any other areas here that you feel that we may not get around to in this year, or those which would be a priority that we definitely would. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, obviously I can't know the answers to everything. It's something that asset management will be able to respond to. What the report is saying here is that actually the project has now entered the pre-application stage, so it is progressing, and as I understand it, that should be coming forward to planning very shortly. So I think it's purely around what resource we've got to deliver these projects, whether there's any issues when the projects are initially brought to planning, and whether there's then revisions to schemes required before they then actually come forward as a formal planning application. So I think it's based on the advice that asset management will get from planning, and whether there's any redesign, etc. Plus, as you'll be aware, there's been a significant issue around resource in the asset management team over the past couple of years. We've got a number of temps in there, and we have had quite a few. We've had some turnover of senior staff within that service.
Any other? Ian?
I was just going to add, I think the kind of key risk to slippage in the capital programme is usually factors outside of our control. So it could be delays in getting planning comments. So we've had issues where schemes have been delayed because of comments from the local lead flooding authority has been a particular challenge. And I think typically it's more external factors that cause some of these capital projects to slip.
Just looking at the papers, a question from my side, because I just spotted something. It says under 2.3, it says street scene project that have been reprofiled to the next year, and one of them obviously I recognize as an area in my ward. So could you just explain in terms of the reprofiling what it involves and why it came to that?
Yes, so I think the ones you're picking up on, Composers Park is one. So we are now we went to tender for the design, and we didn't get a satisfactory response back, so we had to re-tender for that, and that was why that one was delayed and has had to be reprofiled. I'm pleased to say that we've had designs back, and we are shortly to go to a informal consultation on those. It's not actually a proposal which requires planning permission, because there's an existing play area there already, which we're upgrading. So we should be delivering that very early in the next financial year. So I'm hopeful that it will be in place for the summer. The other areas have actually been about reprofiling in respect of capacity and bringing other projects forward, but in advance of these schemes, which have not had full consultation on them yet.
Members, any other questions? Then in that case, let's move on to the next bit of the report, which is Treasury Monitoring. Matthew?
Okay, thank you. So we're moving on to Appendix C now. So as I referred to earlier in the revenue report, investment income is performing very well. We're looking at a variance as at Q3 of 1.37 million, and we expect that to rise by year end to 1.57 million. This is mainly due to higher investment rates being available. At the start of the year, we were expecting the Bank of England base rate to reduce at a much faster rate than it has done this year. So we were predicting lower returns when we set the budget. As I've also said, in terms of the slippage and the underspends on the capital programme, we've spent £20 million less on the capital programme this year than we expected, so we've had higher investment balances throughout the course of the year. So that is in part the reasons. We've also had some loan funding to HDL, to HLL, which are attracting very good rates. So those rates have been fixed in terms of the development loan and the long-term loan that we've now made to HLL. So we're seeing significantly good returns at those. The other thing I would say is that we haven't, because we've not spent on the capital programme at the level that we anticipated, we also haven't had to go out and borrow, because at some point we will need to enter into borrow, and we do have a borrowing need. Our CFR reflects that, but at the moment we don't physically need to go to the market to borrow because we have cash resources. So we're avoiding borrowing costs in doing that, and hence they would normally be netted off against our returns. Just to say that our investment balances at the end of Q3 stood at 58.1 million in total, versus 62.8 million in the previous quarter. So you'll see there's been a reduction overall in the amount that we've got invested, and that's only to be expected as we're spending money on our capital programme. We're seeing those levels reduce, and we would expect that to reduce further over quarter four. Our cash flow generally dips in quarter four because council tax and business rates, there's still a significant amount that are paid in 10 instalments rather than 12. So we expect to get a better cash flow over the first 10 months of the year than we would at the end of the year. But we've still got plenty of money in the bank, so that's not a problem. And we'll see a boost again in April as people want to pay us the whole year in advance, which is great when that happens. So I think generally it's really supporting our revenue budget for this year. It has done for the previous year, and I think we can expect some good returns going forward into next year as well. But I think that's probably what I want to say on Treasury at the moment. Happy to take any questions.
Members, any questions? Councillor Nicholas?
Yeah, just a question of curiosity. The money that we invest from the Section 106 monies, those investments earning about 400,000, I think it says in the report here. Is that money put back into the S106 pot, or is it just used in general financial spends and things?
That's a very good question. So Section 106 monies we hold, there is actually a requirement to apply interest to those. So if we don't spend those monies, we apply interest to them every year. So ultimately what we do is we'll take our average investment return on all of our investments, we'll work out what that average return is, and then we'll apply that average return to all of our Section 106 balances. So any unspent Section 106 will be enhanced annually by that investment. So we've got more money in that 106 to spend on whatever project it relates to.
Any other questions, members, on this? No? Any other input, Matthew or Ian, on this item?
The debt report Appendix D came as a supplement, so it's apologies for that. It was not quite ready at the time.
Have members had time to look at the debt management report? And if you have any questions on that?
Chair, shall I just give you a quick overview? Yeah, so sorry this came as a separate report, so it wasn't ready when the main agenda was published, but I think it came out the following day. Overall, you'll see that the debt has risen in quarter three. The main reasons for that are due to council tax, which has gone up by around 300,000, and business rates, which has gone up by around 400,000. That's not unusual for quarter three, and the reason for that is that as we go throughout the year, accounts fall into arrears, we raise reminder notices. That eventually leads to a summons. We normally have our first summons in July, and then we'll have a second round. We continue to summons throughout the year, but generally we'll see another spike in the third quarter. And ultimately, once we've raised the summons, if we don't get payment, then we'll take that through to liability order. Once we have a liability order, then we can put the debt to an enforcement agent to collect. So we've got a significant amount of debt with our enforcement agent. So that's the main reason for the peaking in quarter 3. I'd hopefully reassure the committee by saying that officers are doing everything they can to collect this debt and making sure that it is passed swiftly over to enforcement agents to try and collect. In terms of the other debt, sundry debt has risen ever so slightly quarter on quarter, but I just wanted to highlight the fact that of the 900k's worth of sundry debt, 200k is actually grant funding, which is currently with, or was currently with HCC, and has since been paid over to us. So that's money that comes into the county council, and then subject to satisfying certain conditions, and that they then passport that over to district authorities. So that 200k has now been received. So overall the debt position has reduced. It's also good just to see that benefit overpayments are continuing to go down overall, but at a much slower rate than they had been in recent times, and that's mainly due to the fact that more and more cases have now moved over to universal credit. So what we're seeing is a lot more new debt arising for overpayments. So where we've had housing benefit clients on our system which had overpayments, they're not classed as a debt whilst they're still on housing benefit, because that is being recovered through their ongoing benefit. When it moves over to the DWP under universal credit, we then have to raise a debt, and then we have to apply to DWP to do an attachment to their benefits to continue collecting that debt. So unfortunately there has been a significant amount of new overpayments being raised as a result of that move to universal credit, but overall we are continuing to see a downward trend in that overall. That is significant at 16.3 million, although only 5.3 million of that relates to Hertsmere, because we also collect debt obviously on behalf of the county council, on behalf of government, on behalf of other bodies. So not all of it directly impacts on our account. And whilst the debt is significant, it does relate to multiple years. And if you look at the write-off reports that we bring forward, and there was one that came forward to Cabinet last week, generally year on year we will write off significantly less than 1% of our annual debt through those write-off reports. So I would say mostly we're collecting in excess of 99% of all of the debt that we raise over time. And so some of it takes a little bit longer to recover, but ultimately we are recovering the majority of the debt that we raise. And happy to take questions, Chair.
Any questions on this? Councillor Giorgio will start, and then Councillor Nicholas.
Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to say I'm pleased to see that housing benefit overpayment debt is generally coming down, and because it's a particularly pernicious type of debt for people who may have received money that they thought that they should have had, and then find out later on that they shouldn't have, and then struggling to repay that debt from already very tight finances. So I'm pleased to see that hopefully should become less of a problem in the future with some of the changes to universal credit and things like that. I wanted to ask a question around, so I'm just trying to find the section, around some of the debts over 180 days in 2.6, around £100,000 in finance and £93,000 in housing from Hertfordshire County Council. I appreciate that their latest budget had some very large deficits, and so they may be struggling to service some of the debts that they have. However, we do collect a large amount of council tax, which we then pay towards them. Are we able to take that away from the council tax payments that we make to them in order to say, well, we were going to give you X amount of money, but if we've taken off the amount that you've owed us and then given you the remainder?
I'll answer that in reverse. So in short, no, we can't. We can't deduct one debt from another, just to sort of say that that's the net position. We're not allowed to do that. But actually the 200k you're talking about is what I just mentioned in my sort of preamble, that they are grant funds which have since been paid over to us. So it's just the fact that the county took them in. There's certain conditions that have to be satisfied before they can passport the grants over to us. They've been satisfied and we've now received those monies.
Councillor Nicholas.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Matthew, I'm sure you know what I'm going to ask you about. This huge outstanding still amount that we've still got sitting that relates to, I know I can't talk about it openly because it would need to be in part 2, but can you give us a vague outline of where we are with that? And is it a possibility that we could bring that to a meeting in part 2 so that we can discuss it in more detail?
Can I just sort of say about SIL in general, we have a regular senior officer meeting that looks at every single SIL debt that we've got, including that one. And we go through case by case to see what we're able to do to recover that. In relation to that one, we did get to a stage where the debtor had made an agreement that they would pay the debt over a period of time. We agreed, or we set out an instalment plan that was agreed verbally, and since then we've not seen any income as a result of that. We are following that up, and when I say we, I mean the Chief Executive is following that up directly with that debtor, and we will keep the pressure on to make sure that we're able to recover that. And in relation to part 2, I'm quite happy to bring that to a part 2 if we're able to have a part 2 for operations. I'm not sure, or I can brief members separately.
I'm sure in regards to part 2 we can work with Democratic Services.
We have part 2 in this in operation review meeting.
And do you want to say something in that regard?
No, that's what I said. Everything.
Any other questions on this? No? Okay, in that. So members are required to, let me go back to my thing. So we need to note the committee report and Matthew's presentation, and I hope that's an agreement, yeah? Great. So that covers item 6. So agenda item 7 is the quarterly procurement update, quarter 4. And Kristen is here to give us an update. Kristen, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. From the procurement perspective, we've had some significant action over the last quarter. Most importantly, the Procurement Act 2023 has now gone live. So we have a whole new set of procurement regulations to work with for our larger procurements. In response to that, we updated our procurement strategy, and that was approved by Council at the end of February, as was our new contract procurement rules. So I just wanted to let you know the main aspects there. So in terms of the strategy, we of course now have a new target action plan. A lot of activity is underway at the moment to get our workflows and our templates ready for the new Procurement Act, whilst at the same time still delivering the service as we do and running through the procurements that are in progress. We have done a training session for officers alongside Hertfordshire County Council's legal team. They offered to do this on behalf of all the districts in the county, and your procurement manager was taking part in that because we serve 3 different districts. So we pooled our resources and did a big training session across, and we had a good attendance from the officers in Hertsmere. We will be producing more training going forward, so there will be regular training available as officers come into Hertsmere or develop and change within their roles. Some of our stuff is embedded already, such as a regular review of our contract register for the internet, and of course we are now quite embedded with having social value as part of our evaluation criteria. We will be updating our selling to the council guide. We are aiming to do that by September. For suppliers at the moment, there is quite a lot of guidance available from the Cabinet Office, including YouTube videos and various light bite training sessions. In terms of the corporate procurement rules, we've updated our thresholds at which we are expecting people to go to competition, and then we will expect people to go on an open tender rather than a quotation basis. We've amended some of the exemptions to our rules, following best practice and looking at what really needs to happen, and I've also brought them in line across the three, so whoever rings up will get the same answer. And some of our aspects around particularly pre-procurement and contract management have been updated because they now feature so much stronger in the new Procurement Act. And that's what I wish to bring forward. Thank you.
Any questions on this, members? No? Councillor Georgiou?
Thank you. Sorry, it always seems to be me going first, but could you tell us a bit more about the, first of all, the laptop refresh that's on here? I think there's a call for framework, and also the consultation software. What consultation software are we using over and above the kind of like Zen City platform that we're currently using, or what are we looking to procure in that item? And just also, you know, in terms of consultation software, one of the pledges that we made was to have a My Hertsmere app. Was that brought to you in terms of some kind of engagement and trying to figure out whether or not, you know, that would be something viably that we could do, and perhaps it could incorporate some of this in terms of consultation?
In terms of the consultation software, since I wrote the report, a contract has been varied, which means we no longer need to do that particular procurement. The Hertsmere app hasn't been mentioned at this point. The laptop refresh, we're invariably going to use a framework for that, because obviously IT is common across all of local government. There are framework providers such as CCS, it'll come back to me, Crown Commercial Services, and there are other frameworks run by the NHS, etc., that we have access to. So we will invariably go out as a mini competition against a framework, so we already have the terms and conditions set, the contractors have been assessed already, so it's almost purely price, and those documents are currently being prepared.
Yeah, a follow-up.
So yeah, with the laptop refresh again, if it comes down to price, will we be considering what the difference in price is, whether or not we go with a framework or whether or not we carry out our own procurement exercise? Because sometimes there can be economies of scale when you're buying these kinds of things, but sometimes they are very similarly priced, and then there's just the extra cost of a framework on top of that, which then sometimes actually means that you're paying more than you would have otherwise done.
Thank you. Yes, we're very conscious of the extra on cost of a framework. However, some of those frameworks have very, very low charges, and those are the ones I tend to steer the officers to. I do expect in this instance that it will be more cost effective to use a framework.
If members don't have any other questions, I have two questions from my side, Kristen. On a similar theme, actually. First thing, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you say laptop refresher, I'm assuming it's for the members of staff and so on, and not for, obviously, our iPads and so on. And the second question was in relation to the election software. I know it's in pre-market engagement, so I take it the timeline won't meet our upcoming elections that's coming up.
No, actually that engagement I've had with the elections team has been nice and early in terms of the timeline on that one. So it has given them plenty of time to look at what's out on the market and consider all our options. So that's still under consideration. Yes, I think we've more or less reached a position since I wrote this, so this will quite quickly move forward. But that contract finishes in September, so it won't affect the upcoming elections at all.
and the laptop refresh. So I take it as to leave the staff, and then not obviously the other iPads and so on.
No, the specification I've seen at the moment is purely staff laptops.
Okay, if members don't have any other questions, then I'll ask the committee to note this report, if everyone's happy. Then we'll move on to agenda. Kristen, thank you for this presentation. Moving on to item 8, which is the forward planning program. Do members have any? Yep, Councillor Quilty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And congratulations on your first chairing of this committee. You've done a sterling job. And this sort of reminds me back to when I was actually sort of a cabinet member here, and the principle of scrutiny and what the council should be getting out of scrutiny and what the cabinet should be getting out of it. And one of the principles back in those days was that a cabinet member should always attend a scrutiny when a paper is coming forward that's in his patch or her patch. And I'm seeing here that there's quite a list of cabinet members here, from all the way down from the leader to, funny enough, the leader's wife, Chris Shenton, all the way down to Nick Oakley. You know, there's a lot of cabinet members here and a lot of scrutiny papers coming forward. Can we 100% be sure that we invite the cabinet member to attend? And it should be a sort of a strong invite, if I put it that way, because I think it's the only way we can actually hold cabinet members to account in relation to scrutiny. Thank you.
Councillor Quilty, the cabinet members listed, or the portfolios listed on the work programme will be invited to every substantial item that this committee considers. It's an invitation, it's not a summons, but it'll be polite but firm.
I think if that's the case, then it should be noted that we would be registering it in the minutes if they don't attend. I think that way it might help. It might help, not this time, because I don't think it'd be right, but it might give them a bit of encouragement to turn up. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up. I think it's custom and practice that portfolio holders do come and present when they have substantive items on the agenda. We have also a number of more routine reporting items that come to the operations committee, and obviously Matthew and Kirsten bring quarterly reports as they have done tonight, and that historically has always been the distinction that this committee and indeed the policy review committee has made. So it's when it's a substantive item that the portfolio holder is invited.
Mr. Chairman,
Councillor Quilty.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but the point is, you know, Chris Myers is the portfolio holder for the area today that we were talking about, which was about young people, right? It would have really helped if he was here. And that, to me, was a substantial item. You know, I think we must ensure, and there's lots of things, you could turn around and saying that is the breach of the data log a substantial item? Well, I think it is, but maybe Rebecca Chalice might not. So you know, but I do think it's our duty as sort of opposition is to hold the cabinet to account in relation to scrutiny, and this is the only place we can do it. So I think the only thing we're all asking for is them to come.
Yeah, through you, Chair, I absolutely understand the point that Councillor Quilty is making. I just wanted to clarify that Councillor Myers is not a portfolio holder for children and young people. That's a county council function, and it was a county council officer that was going to come for that particular item. Yes, I would say the paper that's inaccurate. It's a county council function. The Hertfordshire County Council services are a county council function, and so the portfolio holders may have an interest in them, but there is not a portfolio holder responsible.
We're splitting hairs. The reality is the portfolio holder for young people, he should be here tonight listening to the debate. I'm going to stop now.
Any other questions, suggestions? Councillor Nicholas?
Sorry, could I just say on that item on the 9th of December, is it possible for us to ask, because obviously they've not been here this evening, and there were quite a few questions that I wanted to ask from my point of view as FORG member champion about stuff that's going on with young people around that. The 9th of December is quite a long time away. Is there a possibility that we can call a report in, or call KIPS back again in to talk to us about that report that was presented this evening, please?
Yeah, Alex.
Councillor Nicholas, as members requested in item 5 earlier on, I will repeat the invitation to KIPS Green to attend, preferably is it June or July? First of next, preferably our June meeting, but certainly at the earliest convenience, yes.
Yeah, I mean, Alex, looking at the timetable, I think compared to other bits of the year, June has, from what I can look at, 2 items on the agenda. So I think if the county council officer is willing to come, that might be a good point to for them to come and have another presentation. I mean, we can still have the normal presentation on December, but I mean, it's up to how the timelines work out. Similar thing, I think the one suggestion that you had, Councillor Nicholas, earlier was in terms of part 2 information and so on. I think a suggestion, Alex, would be that maybe, again, there's something that you have to probably look at in more detail, but I think if we can, especially when the agenda permits, have part 2 items specifically put in the agenda so that we can discuss it a bit more, even if it takes a bit more time in the committee, on the committee night. I think it'll still be useful for all of us to go over, because I know there were, like tonight, there were some bits that we wanted to go in more detail, but obviously we couldn't do in this more public forum.
Yeah, I mean, to clarify, Chair, absolutely, members have requested that the presentation that was due tonight comes back at the earliest opportunity, and that's our next meeting, and so that we will absolutely invite Herts County Council officers to come back and talk on that item. If there is a need for a part 2 item on the agenda, there will always be provision made for that. The agenda must be published in advance, and notification given of all the items that are there for discussion. It is perfectly possible in the course of a discussion on a part 1 item that members feel there is a need to go into a confidential session. If that is the case, then you can vote to go into confidential session, and we will turn off the stream, and you will go into part 2. So you don't need to set it out on the agenda. If there is a prepared paper, it will be explicitly marked on the agenda as such.
I think, just looking at tonight's meeting, I think the kind of overall consensus of this committee is that, especially in relation to financial matters and discussing them, we might have to go to part 2. So, I mean, something just to kind of bear in consideration next time. Seeing that Matthew is still here, just something to consider when we meet again in July. Okay, if there are no other questions, then can we note this forward work program? Noted. Noted. Great. Any other item the chair considers urgent? None. And then date of future meeting is provisionally scheduled for 17 June, 17 June here at the civic offices at 7 p.m. And date of any other 2025-26 meetings will be confirmed, obviously, at the annual council on 14th of May. With that, I have 20:36, and I end this meeting. Thank you all for attending.